you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew to Galilee. He left Nazareth and went to live in Capernaum by the sea, in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali, that what had been said through Isaiah the prophet might be fulfilled. Land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, the way to the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who sit in darkness have seen a great light. On those dwelling in a land overshadowed by death, light has arisen. From that time on, Jesus began to preach and say, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." As he was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew, casting a net into the sea. They were fishermen. He said to them, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." At once they left their nets and followed him. He walked along from there and saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother, John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets. He called them, and immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. He went around all of Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and curing every disease and illness among the people. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
As many of you know, I was away for a couple days this week with the bishop and all the priests from the diocese. It was an impromptu meeting that he had to call because we're experiencing some struggles figuring out our priest assignments for the upcoming year. And so we had a discussion about it. And I thought about coming back and telling you all that I was fired, but I was afraid you guys would erupt in applause and cheers, right? So I decided not to do that today, and I am back with you, and I'm very grateful. One of the things that we did when we were together with all the priests and the bishop is every pastor got to speak about his parish and about what was going on in his parish. And man, I was just filled with pride of St. Bernard. You know, we are doing so many good things here at St. Bernard. I love the things that we've been able to accomplish. And I told everybody about how we have the most beautiful parking lot in the entire state of Indiana. Right? I told them about our awesome Octaco Fest, all of our volunteers. I mean, we have so many people who are so generous with their time here. We have volunteers here who practically are like full-time staff members, right? And they do it for free. And also the amount that our parishioners do for the community. I was able to get a tour of the Women's Resource Center here in town last week. And I was amazed at the amount of names that the person running the Crisis Pregnancy Center, the amount of names from our parish, right, who are key volunteers, right, at the place, right? So I was filled with pride. And it just reminded me of how much I love being at St. Bernard and how excited I am about our parish's future. Right? There's so many good things happening and so many more good things to come. And I was thinking about that this morning as we heard from this letter from St. Paul to the Corinthians. St. Paul, in the beginnings of Christianity, in one of the churches that he had founded in Corinth, he said this: "I urge you, brothers and sisters, in the name of Jesus, that there be no divisions among you." No divisions among you. When I was in my first year of seminary, I was at a seminary. I won't tell you where it was at, right? I don't want to bash on it. I actually had a great experience when I was there, but when I was there halfway through the year, we had an 8-day silent retreat. How many of you have ever been silent for 8 days before, right? Maybe we need to do an 8-day silent retreat sometime with St. Bernard, right? It was challenging, but it was a great time to grow closer to Christ in prayer. And we had this priest who was leading the retreat, and this priest had been an exorcist for most of his priesthood. If I'm not mistaken, he's actually still active in the exorcism ministry today. But one of the things that was striking is that during all of his talks, he kept repeating something over and over. He kept saying, the devil is powerful in this seminary. The devil has a stronghold here. And many of you are still not listening to what I am telling you. And he said this over and over again, like at the beginning of every talk. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting, you know? It's not like people were going around, celebrating black masses or anything, right? So what was he talking about? And after a while, I thought, maybe he just, he's an exorcist. This is something he talks about a lot. Maybe he does this at every retreat that he gives. Now, the next year, our diocese actually stopped sending to that seminary because of some of the shortcomings of the seminary. And so I was at a new seminary up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I noticed a huge difference in the attitudes and the environment of the seminarians there. There is so much less cynicism and complaining and gossip and all sorts of things. And lo and behold, when we had our 8-day silent retreat again at this new seminary, it just so happens that that very same priest was the retreat director again. And so I prepared myself. Now, he's probably going to be saying a lot of the same things. And he did say a lot of the same things, except never once did he mention the devil in any of his talks. Now, that was a moment of realization for me that he really meant what he had said a year prior, that the devil had a stronghold in that seminary. And it was a realization for me. Many of us, when we think about the devil, when we think about evil, we think that the church, or we think that every parish is going to be like a refuge. Quite the contrary. Where else would the devil want to be working but in the church? When good things are happening in the church, or when good things in a parish are happening, it drives the devil crazy, and he wants to sneak in and to begin to sow division and cynicism and dissent. And indeed, looking back on my first year of seminary, that was exactly what was happening in the seminary. There was all sorts of animosity between the formators and the seminarians. There was dissent. There was cynicism. There was constant complaining. And I wonder, St. Bernard, we have so many things going for us. And I think it is important for us to protect ourselves against those sneaky ways the devil can creep in to our parish. One of the greatest ways he does it is by sowing division, as St. Paul spoke of this morning. In the New Testament, the devil is called the diabolos, right? The devil. The Greek word literally means to cast apart. He tries to disrupt. He tries to divide. It's very important that we protect ourselves as a parish, especially because of all of the great things that are indeed happening here. We would be foolish to think that these vices would not creep in. How do we protect ourselves against these subtle attacks? The first thing we need to do is, as a parish, we need to be people who pray. So many parishes are underperforming because the majority of the people in the pews do not pray. And because those people, their eyes are not all united and focused on Christ. So what do you hear them talking about the faith? Well, I disagree with this church teaching, or, my priest is okay, but I really don't like how he does this, or, oh man, I just can't stand the bishop. Because people aren't praying. And so we end up focusing on all the wrong things instead of focusing on Christ. Are you a person who prays? How could we possibly expect our parish to grow and thrive if we are not praying? If we ourselves as individuals are not growing closer to Christ? Another way to protect our parish is to be intentional and cautious of our speech. One of the greatest ways to destroy a parish is to be a person who spreads gossip in our parish. There are so many people who I've spoken to in my various assignments who eagerly offer their services to their church, and lo and behold, once they were out in the spotlight, once they were putting themselves out there, the parishioners began to gossip and tear them down. Are we a parish who spreads gossip? How do you avoid gossip? When we gather together as parishioners, as a community, it's very important that we're intentional about what we talk about. My first seminary, there was no intentionality. And so everybody just talked about what the latest thing was to complain about that day, or the latest critique to offer of a formator or a teacher. My second seminary is totally different because everybody was intentional about the conversation. They intentionally found things that were uplifting to speak about. And we should be doing the same thing as parishioners. When you talk to other parishioners, what are the topics of conversation? Is it other parishioners and their shortcomings? Or do you ask questions like, tell me about something good happening in your life right now? Tell me about one of the ways that God is working in your life. Those are the kinds of things that we should be talking about in conversation. Are we people who, when we speak, our conversations are full of complaints and critiques? A few years ago, I talked to a staff member of a parish who told me she never realized how mean people could be until she started working for her church, and how critical the parishioners could be. Are we a parish that is constantly criticizing our key volunteers or staff members or the pastor? Right, I know there's plenty of things to critique about me, okay? But still, be careful about how we speak about these things. How do we speak about the Mass? How do we speak about our experience of church? Again, at my second seminary, the one that was much better, there was actually a rule that the rector placed because he got so tired of seminarians who think they know everything about the church and everything about the Mass. And he started to notice that as soon as Mass would end, it was like seminarians would start criticizing and start pontificating about what they think the Mass should have been like. And so he actually instilled a rule that seminarians were forbidden to talk about the liturgy until at least an hour after it was over. I think that would be a pretty good rule to have here at St. Bernard. Because how many people, when they come to Mass, they complain about this or that part of the homily or this piece of music or anything else, instead of focusing on the fact that the Lord of the universe just came down upon our altar and we received him into our souls. The only thing that should be coming out of our mouths about the Mass is praise and gratitude for what God has done for us in the Mass. How do we speak about our experience of the Mass, the liturgy? Another thing that can destroy a parish are grudges and resentment. How many parishes do you find where people are still holding grudges against other parishioners about things that happened months and even years in the past? This isn't just a problem with parishioners. This is a problem that priests have often as well. Oftentimes I'll hear priests and they'll criticize the bishop or somebody else about something that happened 10 years ago. And they're still talking about it. How many of us can do that as parishioners as well? Still holding resentments and grudges from years long past. As if parishioners can't grow and change and improve. As if we don't recognize that we ourselves make stupid mistakes all the time. How would we feel if somebody else was holding a grudge against us years later? If you are tempted to be one of those people who hold a grudge or resentment, I encourage you to think about doing one thing. Instead of stewing over that, ask yourself, what is something I can personally control, something I can do in this parish to make sure that that never happens to anybody else? How can I improve the parish so that this doesn't happen again? The last thing we need to do to protect ourselves as a parish against these subtle creepings of the devil is we need to be magnanimous. How many of you know what the word magnanimous means? It's not very common in the English language anymore. It's a Christian virtue. It's one of my very favorite words and something that is not very well known. Magnanimity comes from two Latin words, magna, which means great, and anima, which means soul. Greatness of soul. A magnanimous person doesn't get caught up in cynicism and narrow-mindedness. A magnanimous person doesn't get caught up in those vicious strategies of the devil. A magnanimous person doesn't settle for surface-level conversations or negative conversations. A magnanimous person is always lifting others up and always asking more of himself or herself. A person who lives with greatness of soul. And we need a lot more of that in the Catholic Church. Too many people who are making excuses for why their churches aren't thriving and surrendering and becoming cynical and giving up and becoming negative. We need to be magnanimous. At my first parish, I had an eye-opening experience about magnanimity. I was at a parish council meeting, and I'd only been at the church for a few months. And the church I was at had been in debt for over 20 years. And were struggling to make ends meet financially. And shortly after I arrived there, they had the unfortunate experience of discovering that the church roof had a large leak. And so all of a sudden, we were trying to make ends meet, we were in debt, and all of a sudden we had this huge, unexpected, costly project that we had to figure out. And there was a woman at the parish council who I later became really good friends with because I learned from her in this experience. And when she heard about this, she went to parish council and she said, "No, we can raise the money. People care about this church." And immediately the response from the pastor and the other people sitting around was, "We're never going to be able to find somebody who can lead this. Who's going to do all the work?" She said, "Well, I'll do the work." And again, she heard more and more excuses. We've tried fundraisers like this in the past. You don't understand. Good luck. Right? She said, "No, I'll be a part of this. I'll form a team. And what we'll do is we'll talk to the Knights of Columbus. And we'll take their Oktoberfest, which has been struggling, and we'll make that the climactic event to close out this fundraiser." And they said, "Okay, good luck." And she went to the Knights of Columbus. And she went to their meeting, and she got the same responses. "You don't understand. You're new here. You don't know what it's like. We've tried these things before." And my friend, instead of giving up, she chose to be magnanimous. And she refused to give up. And sure enough, when the fundraiser was over, we had blown the goal out of the water. And the Oktoberfest had so many people there that it was literally, there were people waiting an hour for their food because there were so many people who showed up. It's kind of similar to what we had with Pave the Way, right, in our parking lot. It's important that all of us be magnanimous when it comes to our faith, and especially when it comes to our parish. Our parish will only thrive in the measure that we magnanimously pursue its growth. We need to be magnanimous. When I was with those priests this week, I was so full of excitement about the possibilities in the future of our parish, and I really believe that. I really feel like the sky is the limit with St. Bernard. But in order for that to happen, it is so crucial that we take these words of St. Paul seriously. I urge you, brothers and sisters, that there be no divisions among you, no gossip, less complaints, no grudges, no divisions. And we will set this county on fire with this parish.